And let me just close the Twitter, because I was trying to answer there as well about the talk. So let's go close this one as well. So let's quickly speak about Vue Composition API, which is a new feature delivered in Vue 3. Honestly, even a bit before Vue 3, we were having a plugin since Vue 2.6. And before we start, let me give an important warning. I'm giving this warning to all the people around for all over a year. And this warning is, when we first introduced the Composition API with an RFC of Vue.js, we said that you will progressively migrate away from deprecated options until eventually switching to the standard build. And by standard build, we meant the build with the Composition API. And that was a word that created a huge issue for the all Vue community. This word was deprecated. Guess how people have read this? Current syntax to be deprecated. Composition functions will eventually be the only way to build Vue components. This is actually quotes from Reddit. And people were complaining about, do I need to rewrite my whole application? Oh my God, Vue is going Angular way, like from Angular 1 to Angular 2. And it was so big that it was absolutely unhandled. We were trying to fight this on Twitter, and since then, we always say that Composition API is purely additive. This is not a new exclusive way to build your application. You can use all good option syntax, which is the current syntax of Vue 2, without even touching Composition API, and you will be completely fine. It has its own usage, and I will explain why we developed it and when you want to use it. But please remember, you don't need to learn to use Vue. This is an advanced feature. With this warning, let me quickly reintroduce myself. My name is Natalia, and if you're an English speaker, don't try to read my surname. Every single time it's screwed so badly. It's Tepluhina, but it's like, I always ask MCs to use only first name. I'm Vue.js core team member and author of Vue 3 documentation. So if you're using documentation of Vue 3, this is like 80% done by me. So you can blame me for everything you can find here for any single typo, and please submit a pull request if you see one. I work as a Staff Frontend Engineer at GitLab, and GitLab uses Vue.js for our frontend stack. So I'm developing Vue and using Vue every single day. And I'm also a Google developer expert in web technologies. And this fancy title means that I know how to use Chrome console. And when you will see how I debug the code, because live coding always fails, and you will see this soon, I will use console log a lot. Just my favorite feature for debugging. Like if you're using debugger when you develop your JavaScript code, you're a guru for me because I'm always debugging with a console log. So, first question, why do we need a new API? Vue was previously known as a framework that is probably the easiest to learn from all the big three of frameworks. And this creates a question. It's nice, it's usable. Why new API? What we're missing? To understand this, let's take a look at the code of the application, and we will be looking at the code of this application. I call it Cat Explorer. This is very basic page, no routing, no state management, and it just searches for cat breeds like this. Or I can like search for something else like CMS, and it has a sorting, so we can just sort them by 3 different parameters. That's it, just the features. So how does this component look like? First, we need to code a search. For this, we need to define properties for breed search, right? 2 reactive properties, which is a search query we're typing in the input field, and array of results that is returned from the search. And we basically have one method that just calls an API and saves whatever we need in breed search results. So we are using data properties and methods. And then we have sorting. And if we take a look at the sorting again, we need some reactive data properties, which is options for sorting and selected option. In our case, the selected option index. And we have a computed property that calculates, based on selected option, what are the sorted results. So again, data and computed. And if we combine them in one component, like two features, this is the actual code for the search. And this is the code for the sorting. So you can see that if we speak about component logic, it's pretty much fragmented. And it's only two features. If we go further, if we add more and more and more logic to that component, sometimes you cannot split this logic by components. You still need it in one component. Grouping by option is not helping here, because every single time you will need to jump from data to method, from method to data, to computed, whatever else. And how do we compose reusable features? What if I want to work on search only? What I have a task? What if I have a task to work on search, to fix something, to change something? How do I group this? First option that Vue 2 had was not the best one, because it was mixins. And mixins in general is considered to be not a good coding practice in general, not only in Vue, but everywhere. So mixin basically is just an object that can contain everything that component contains. In this case, it would be an object for search that contains data for search and methods. And then we have sorting mixin that contains data and computed that belong to sorting. We can save these mixins into separate files, and then don't try to read this. The font is really small, but you can see that if we have two mixins, the grouping is kind of good. The only thing where it crosses is breed search results. We just import into mixins and everything seems good, unless it's not. First of all, mixins are not really reusable. Why? Let's quickly take a look at the search mixin. As you can see, run breed search method is hard-coded here. You cannot pass anything. You're just using this breed endpoint, and with the same params, with the same endpoint, with the same logic on handling the result. What if I want to change it tomorrow? I will need to write a mixin, and in this case, every single place that used mixin, I need to ensure that I'm using the correct endpoint. If I want to change this to GraphQL, no way. I will be changing the mixin, and it has no flexibility. This will always call the same endpoint. No parameters are passed here. Maybe I just wanted to pass the logic of this method to mixin, but it's not possible. Conflict prone. When mixins are mixed into the component, Vue started using its own merge strategies for every single property. And if we have lifecycle hooks like mounted or created or something like this, in this case, Vue will perform a merging. So mixin mounted will be merged with component mounted with no overwriting, but for data properties, methods, and computed. If component has the same data property with the same name, for example, user, that a mixin, component will override this property. And you don't, if you won't know that property was overridden. Any conflict names will create additional issues for you because they are not handled anywhere. You will not have any kind of warning in the console. They will just override it and that's it. And my favorite one is Unclear Source. Because when you added mixin to the component and you're using methods of this mixin, they are not indicated anyhow in the component. And in GitLab code, I'm not proud of this. There are places where we have components with 5 mixins added. It's just hell when you start working with them. You have a method, you click on it, component has no such method. You try to find the mixin that contains this method. And sometimes mixins contain mixins, which creates an absolute hell when you try to find something you need in the component. So, okay, mixins are not the best one. What else do we have? Scope slots. This one is definitely more advanced than mixins, and I'm not going to dive into explaining scope slots in the scope of, pun intended, in the scope of this talk. But let me quickly explain what's going on here. Slot in the component basically is just a small window, a slot, where you can put any kind of content. For example, we have generic search component that contains a default slot where we can add input, breadcount, whatever. And generic search in this case works like a wrapper. What about scoped slots? Scoped slots mean that we can expose part of the component scope back to the parent. So for example, in generic search, we can expose our query and results as breed search object, and we can send it back to parent and use it. So in this case, we can pass our own breed search method as a prop here. I'm not a big fan of this. If you work with Vue, try not to pass functions as a prop, but for the sake of example, we can do this. So we have more flexibility. I can pass whatever I want here, be it Axios call, GraphQL call, different endpoints, and I expose back our breed search with query and results. And I can use them in the parent scope. What is not good with this approach? This is definitely more flexible than mixins, more complicated as well, but it's still not flexible. Unfortunately, with this approach, I'm still bound to whatever I'm exposing from breed search. And like with not flexible, I also mean that breed search query, breed search in general will be only available in the template. If I want to go to data and access breed search there, no chance, because it's exposed by a scope slot. It's not available in component data or methods. It exists only in the runtime. And it's less performant because I still need to create a component for this. And creating Vue components, especially in Vue 2, was not the most performant operation ever. So we have all of this, and it's still not satisfactory. That's why the idea of composition API came to mind. And I believe that composition API is impossible to explain only by throwing code snippets or examples. So we have caps, and we're going to do some live coding to see how it works in the component, to debug it probably. Bear with me, and let's go and see the code. So here, you can see exactly the same component I've been showing you with all the breed search logic and sorting logic and some computeds and methods with Axios call. And on mounted, I'm starting searching for the cats. Before we start abstracting anything in the outside files, let's start just add some composition API to this component just to see how it works, how it works with, in general, with the options API, and how it feels. So what is added on Vue 3 to all the component options we had, like data, computed, and methods? Right now, we have a new option called setup. In terms of component lifecycle, setup is called before component is created. So it's very early in a component lifecycle. That's why anything we expose from setup is available on data computed and methods, but we cannot access data from the setup. Let's recreate a part of the logic with a composition API exactly in this component before we start abstracting it to the standalone file. So we have these two properties, which is search query and search results, and this is a reactive state. In Vue, when you change any piece of reactive state, this will cause error rendering if you're accessing this in the template, and we do, because we have breed search on our input, and we have results in the computed as well. So let's start with creating a reactive property, a standalone reactive property from our breed search query and breed search results. To make it shorter, I will call it search query. And to make a standalone primitive property reactive, we will use a helper method called ref. And we need to pass an initial value, which is an empty string. As you can see, ref is automatically imported from Vue. Since Vue 3 is fully tree shakeable, so you only import whatever you need from the Vue bundle. What happens with search query with this magical method under the hood? In fact, since this moment, our search query is an object with a single property called value. And the initial value of the value is an empty string. The only difference with simple plain object is this object is reactive. Every single time we change this value, rendering will happen. You might ask, why this complication? Why does create an object under the hood with a value? The thing is, Vue 3 reactivity is built upon proxies, upon JavaScript proxies. And JavaScript proxy only works with an object. That's why we have two different methods of creating reactive things. We have reactive. You can use reactive on an object, and every single property will be turned into reactive one. And we have ref, used on primitives. And with ref, well, we can use it on reference types as well. You will see I will be using it with array. But basically what happens here is we create value. This is very important to remember, and I will explain it a bit later, because sometimes in options and in template, Vue will automatically unwrap this value. But within setup, you will need to remember about this and access the search query.value. So we created this one. Let's also create a search results. Results. It will be again a ref of an empty array. And here goes a very important moment of when you're using the composition API. With the setup, you will need to return whatever you want to expose to template. So I'm returning search query and search results. So far, it will not affect our template, but let's take a look at the browser and let's go to Vue DevTools. So here is our application properties. So far, everything is like this. And if we start typing here, it's not updating. DevTools are still in beta, that's why it's like this. But search query is an empty string, search results an empty array, and we still have breed search and breed query here. Let's go back and replace all the occurrences of breed search query and breed search results with these new properties. So we have breed search query, and we want to replace it with search query. Okay, let's replace everything, and let's do the same for results. Okay. So I have two properties exposed from setup, and they are used everywhere in the options. Let's take a look at our application. Sorting happens. Search happens as well. And as you can see right now, it's updating properly when I'm typing. So far, so good. We moved our reactive state to the composition API setup. Let's go a bit further, and let's also move our run breed search method to composition API as well. For this, we won't need any kind of helper like ref, because method is a method. It's just a function. So I will define const run breed search, which is a function. And let's just copy paste the logic from whatever we have here and start fixing it, because this one is not going to work from scratch. I will also delete this method here. And of course, I still need to remember to return it from my setup. Otherwise, the first error that I have will be run breed search is not a function. We didn't return it, so our template has no idea what we're doing. Okay, we return it, and let's check our next error. It says cannot read property breed endpoint of undefined. Let's check where this error happens. We're accessing this breed endpoint, and in the scope of setup, unlike the options API of Vue, this is not defined. You don't have a component instance as this. So you need to remember to never go to this. And also, our breed endpoint is defined and computed. And when setup is initiated, computed still don't exist. So we need to move breed endpoint as a computed property also to the setup in this case. Let's do this. So we have breed endpoint. And this is a computed property. Again, on composition API, everything is traceable. So we need to import computed from Vue as well. And let's see what we are returning here. It says this search query breed search breeds. Again, this doesn't exist here. So we go with search query. And it seems good. Let's delete computed and see that it's not working. I will also return breed endpoint just to demo. It will still not work because this is not existing. But yay, laggy DevTools. No chance to show you, but okay, let's just remove this and leave it bread endpoint, search query, search results. It should be good. It won't be good. Still not happening. Oh, okay. So it goes. As you can see, our breed endpoint is breed search right now. If we check the condition, it's weird, right? Because we have a condition that endpoint should be breed search only when we have search query. And our search query is empty. It's an empty string. So it shouldn't be like this. It should go to breeds. What's happening here? Very important moment is to remember that search query is a ref. This is an object with value property. And when you check if an object is true, even if it's an empty object, it's true. That's how JavaScript works. So in this case, we should be checking not search query, but search query value. Let's check the breed endpoint now. So you can see it breeds. And if I start typing, it changes to breed search. So we did it correct. Okay, don't forget to add value here and to search results because this is ref as well. But what is breed endpoint? We say this is computed property based on search query value and it returns breed search and breeds, and it's still not working because breed endpoint is computed. It also contains a ref under the hood. So if we go to Network tab and check what's happening, why it's not showing us cats, we can see that it's not even calling anything. It gives us an error because it tries to understand what the URL is here, and the URL is an object with value property. So our browser is kind of going nuts. Let's make it correct. Let's also call breed endpoint value. And I understand that adding value everywhere seems a bit of annoying, but remember that when you're using Vue, you always use this. It's kind of the same boilerplate. We just get used to use this and not getting used to use value. So let me just refresh it. And as you can see right now, our cats kind of work. Search is working, sorting is working as well. And we just have a bunch of values. Important moment here is to remember that value is added inside of the setup. But if we use the exposed search query search results property somewhere in the calculation in the options API, Vue is smart enough to do the automatic unwrap here. So you don't need to refer to this .search results.value. Same for template. We use vmodel search query, not search query value. So the only place to remember about value is setup or composables, which we will cover right now. So I kind of exposed the logic for the search in the setup, but I want to be it a standalone composition function that I want to import to my component and use here. And I don't want to hard code this logic. I want to pass this logic to my composition function. And after this, I'm just returning the result it gives me. So let's go to composables. Just in case I see like there are a few messages in the chat. I'm not checking them right now. I will check all the questions after the talk. Sorry, but live coding is not easy as it is. And if I start checking questions, I will be just failing every single string of the code, trust me. So let's create our first composable to abstract the logic of search. Well, let's call it search.js. And here I will export a function. I hate it when Zoom does this to me. Let's move it. And let's call it use search. Whoever uses React hooks right now are definitely smiling because use is a typical prefix for React hooks. And a small secret, when we were developing the composition API, when it was actually ready and we needed to give it a public name because you have to name things somehow to present them to people. We had a few votes about like, how do we name this API? And I think the winning favorite was not hooks API. So people can feel the difference with React. Another secret about naming was we also have a helper that is called watch effect to watch side effects. And we really wanted to call it React. Import React from Vue. Sounds very good. So let's start moving our logic to use search. First of all, I'm completely safe to just copy paste these two reactive properties here. And I will also want to have my run breed search here, and it's still a method, but let's make it flexible. What I want to do, I will pass a callback here, get results. Hope I'm not failing with this. Yep, get results. And what I want to do here, whatever is passed to useSearch, I want to call it. So it will be get results. And I only want to have my search query here as a parameter. So I will pass my search query to this callback. Again, remember about value. And then whatever I have is in the response, I just want to store the search results value. And that's it. I want to have whatever search method I pass here. I use it with my search query and then I store the result, the search results value. That's it. Okay, let's go to AppVue and start refactoring our code to use the composable. First of all, let's import our use search from composables search. So here, I will say that I want to see, oh, and again, don't forget to return things. Search results, search query, and method. So here I'm accessing them. Search query, search results, and run breed search is exposed from use search, and let's pass a method here. So here I will be saying that this is a query, and here our search query value will be passed as a parameter. I will move my breed endpoint here because this will be our query, not value, because I will be exposing value here. I don't need double value with this. And I will not show breed endpoint in my return values anymore because it's only in the scope of the callback right now. And I will return this access call with a few changes. So again, I'm getting it with breed endpoint value, nothing is changing here. Here, we already passed search query value as query, so we can simply replace it. And as a response, I'm not assigning anything. I just need to return filtered data. Because my callback will just filter the data and search, and search will do the assignment here. Okay. Let's check where did we fail. And we definitely did. Identifier on breed search has already been declared. Of course, because it's here. Next, ref is not defined because I didn't import it to my use search. Import ref from Vue. Okay, next. It seems that cats are already on place. Let's try to search for more cats. And did we break a sorting on the go? Nope, we didn't. So right now, what we have here is we're just defining the endpoint, and this might be completely different logic, our composable doesn't need to know about this because this is a high-level abstraction. And here we're passing our query. I could change breed endpoint to whatever else. I could change Axios to using fetch or GraphQL or whatever I would prefer. And all the filtering logic would happen here. So search is nicely abstracted here in our composable. Now let's try to do the same with the sorting. And to do this, to make it nicely abstracted, I will also create a sorting.js. And here I will be export default function use sorting. Let's try to take a look at our sorting logic and understand what should be passed to our composable and whatever we want to be returned from it. So first of all, we have options. And this one actually shouldn't even be reactive. I put it to data just for the quick access, but this is just hard-coded array. There is nothing reactive about it. It never changes. So I don't want to move these options to my sorting logic, obviously, because maybe I'm going to use some different options. So I will just pass options here as a parameter. And let's take a look at what else do we need to actually sort something. So options are moved. Let's also move them from here. I will just create const sorting options equal to this array. And I will also return it from here because we're using sorting options in the template. So we need to expose it here. I'm like, okay, let's return it from the setup. And we will be passing them as well to our composable. I need also to replace them here. What else do we have? To sort something, you can see the logic here. We actually need items to sort. And our items are search results. We don't want to access search in the sorting, obviously. We're separating different logic. So we need to pass something that we call items. Makes sense. So let's replace options from here. We have a selected option index. This is the current active option from our sorting dropdown. This definitely belongs to the composable. So let's start creating our reactive state here as well. Selected option index is, again, we will make it a ref from 0 because initial value was 0 here as well. And I can remove data completely. And we need to copy the logic of sorted results computed. So we will have sorted results. And this is a computed property, less auto import. And we are just adding it here. So there is no more these result sorting options, just options we passed here. And we don't need this result sorting here as well. But since selected option index is a ref, we need to remember to use its value. And we also use /order by here. So I will move the import of /dash from the main component to sorting. These search results doesn't exist anymore. It will be items. More to say, this will be items value. And I will explain why in a minute. And just return select, oh wow, selected option index and sorted results. So why items will be a value? Because we would need search results passed as a property, passed as an argument of the sorting.js. But we also need to track any single change to search results. So we will be passing not search results, but computed based on it. We can actually pass search results on its own, and you will see that it's not calculating things when we change search. So let's start building our use sorting. Import use sorting from composable sorting. And let's say that we want selected option index and sorted results to be returned by our use sorting. And we pass sorting options as a first parameter. And let's pass search results as second, first without compute. And we need, of course, return it from here. Option index and sorted results. We need to remove this computed to prevent logic duplication. And here it will be just selected option index. Oh, wow. I thought it'd break, but it didn't. So let's start sorting things. Everything's good, right? But now let's start with something like C. Our search has run. Oh, it still works. Things that maybe we don't need computed. Previously, it didn't. Good. It's even shorter right now. So we have search and sorting both abstracted onto their own composables. And UpVue is only operating the return values of these two different composables. Of course, this is a bit of annoying. I really hate this return statement. But it's very explicit because you can always check everything from everything really fast. And all the logic is pretty much explicit and understandable. So if you wonder where you can find this code, there is this link with a composition API demo. It's a bit outdated. I think it uses Vue version beta, and current code I've been working right now is using the release Vue 3.0.2. But there is no big difference in the code, only dependencies. And thank you. Right now, I can finally check the chat. So it was mostly about the issues, I think.
Yeah, so, sorry about that. Some people had issues with the audio because they were trying to access from the phone. We tried to fix that. Guys, if you have any questions about the talk, I see one, Natalia.
I'm reading them. So in a ref, it's only value, it's one property. If you want to have more properties, you can use reactive. So you can take an object like full of any kind of fields and properties, use reactive on it, and every single property will be turned into reactive one. Cat person. I'm happy. I'm a cat person myself. That's why you can see like. Okay, are there only disadvantages with using mixins with the composition API? I would never say that there is something black and white, because it all depends on your application. It all depends on your use case. It all depends on your team as well. Because what is better about mixins, in my opinion, as docs author, mixins are definitely more accessible for people that only start learning Vue. So it's easy to explain, like mixin is just an object with the same properties, you can use them this way. While composition API needs deeper understanding of JavaScript in general and abstracting logic as a concept. So this is a first disadvantage you can have. Mixins won't be deprecated for sure. We learned our lesson from the deprecated word. And I think after this story, it was really an interesting moment because there was even an article on Dev that says Vue darkest day. And I think Evan promised we won't deprecate any Vue 2 thing at least for Vue 3 and Vue 4, which is not even planned so far. So no deprecations for us, definitely. So why and when should we not use composition? I would say it's very similar question to why and when we should use Vuex or any kind of state management and why and when we shouldn't. Don't overcomplicate the application. Sometimes if your components are pretty straightforward and they don't have any reusable pieces of logic, don't go for composables. You can use setup for composition functions, but don't go with abstract logic if you don't reuse it. If you feel not really comfortable with the new syntax, don't use composition, start with options API. And again, why I compared it to state management, there is a nice quote from Dan Abramov about state management, about Redux actually. Like, how do I know that I need Redux? It's like glasses. When you need them, you feel it. So when you feel like there is a lot of code you reuse and it needs an abstraction layer, try composition API. How would you integrate Vuex in the composition API for TypeScript as well? Vuex 4 is actually perfectly good with the composition API. Vuex 5 is even better. So for people that like don't dive too deep into what's going on with Vuex, it will have two new versions. It actually has new version 4, which is completely the same API it was with Vue 2. And it has Vuex 5. Vuex 5 has a different API, and it's designed for people that are building new applications rather than refactoring old applications. Because if it was only Vuex 5, and someone said, you need to refactor like all the GitLab code for Vuex, I was like, no, we're not migrating to Vue 3 anytime soon. So yep, our examples on next docs regarding TypeScript are very limited, mostly because we're not pursuing TypeScript as the main audience of the docs. We will be definitely expanding TypeScript. And I believe Vuex will also expand docs for TypeScript usage as well. Why would I use Vue instead of vanilla.js? If I start speaking about this, we will go for an hour more. And it's really funny because this was one of the assessment questions for the interview for GitLab. Why would I need any kind of framework instead of vanilla.js? The thing is, why frameworks exist in general? Because they make the synchronization between your model, between data you have, and your view, which is actually what you see on the screen, really nice, reusable, and fast. You can try to build an example with vanilla.js, for example, just updating the value of the div, like text in the div, depending on any kind of form input. And it's done pretty fast. You will be manipulating the DOM, the real DOM, so it's expensive, but it works. But if you try to scale this, if you try to make it more scalable, like if you have forms with 10 fields and you want to change different things in the view depending on what you're doing with these input fields, you will see this is not scalable. This will be growing, become more complicated. So any kind of framework is nice when you have a dynamic state that is changing, like rich user interaction, forms, whatever, and you want your view to react on these changes really fast. I would say for mostly like static websites that don't have that much of user interactions, yes, vanilla JS is still good. Like, I would never say that build a static homepage with maybe one form and that's it, using like a heavy tool, like for example, Angular, even Vue itself. It's nice to add some interactivity to it, but this is definitely not a requirement. What would you say the biggest difference between React hooks and Composition API? First of all, there is no predefined Composition API composables. There is no use state or something similar to this. The internal implementation is completely different. And I would say that working with Composition API was easier for me than hooks. Hooks definitely have more complications. So depending on tests, this is again the matter of preference. I would say I would be writing tests for composables, definitely. And it's nice because they are just pure functions. I was showing this, and I could use mounted in the Composition API function. I didn't do this on purpose because right now, two of my composables are pure functions. They are really easy to test, no side effects. You just pass parameters, you return something, testable. And we can add lifecycle hooks to composables as well. But I don't like it in general because this creates a side effect in the composable. And in my opinion, tracking this side effect is not that